Welcome to the first Changemakers event for 2024, choosing the right model for your creative enterprise, and what I'm sure will be an enlightening and reflective discussion. The Making Change strategy in this two-year project by its very name has change at its heart. So when developing the idea behind these Changemaker events, I saw an opportunity to present a series of discussions that were not necessarily a how-to, but a presentation of options that offer the possibility for change. So we'll certainly talk about the systems that we work within, what needs to change and what might, but agency for change also resides with each of you. And the intention of Changemakers is to offer you the tools for reflection towards your own practice, organisational structure and ways of doing things, to enable the type of change that really ensures sustainability from within. Throughout the year, we hope to host at least half a dozen of these discussions on topics that will range from funding, collaboration, building value and visibility, accessibility, and the transformation that's possible when bringing a creative lens to place in a community. These will be hosted by experts and experimentalists, all people who work comfortably within an environment of change. One of the other key objectives of Making Change is to build connection, and the Changemakers events present a wonderful opportunity for creatives across the region to gather and connect, to build ongoing relationships and to share knowledge. We've established a Facebook group as part of Making Change that also enables this connection in digital form. So if you're on Facebook, simply search for We Are Making Change Online Hub, and you can request to join, and that'll be a forum where everyone gets to share their knowledge, and we'll also be posting stuff that comes from Regional Arts Victoria and other organisations.
Having an understanding of what it is that you're trying to do and why is actually really critical, and that might be as simple as I'm going to work with the 5 artists, singers, actors or whatever in my street, in my neighbourhood, the people I think are fantastic, make a play, make an exhibition, and now I'm going to do it repeatedly. That's actually going to be my activity. But I think actually understanding what that purpose is and then turning that into something that says, well, here are the connections between all of the things that I would like to do and where I would like to go next is very important. And one of the most difficult things of all when you're right in the thick of it is elevating yourself out of the I need to put barcodes on things, I need to figure out how my e-commerce site works, I need to organise rehearsals, all of that dailiness, to actually go, well, what's my purpose, what will I be doing in 5 years, and what will that get, what direction that will take me in, and what I might want to do after that. And so the strategy is that sort of big picture thinking that guides you, and my conviction is that sustainability comes out of that because it will help you make decisions about what's important. So that if, for example, you want to be an independent theatre producer based in Bannockburn, your strategy may very well be that you would like to have a season of your home theatre company here in Bannockburn, but you might need to tour in order to get your work seen in other places to maybe earn some more money from ticket sales. What's the planning bit is how am I going to do it today or tomorrow or in the next year, but the strategy is that's what you want to do. If you like collaborating and you would like to grow your business beyond just you, then maybe a corporate structure is appropriate. And the ways of developing a corporate structure are actually much wider than I think we're all led to believe. I mean, to have a company, you really only need to have 3 directors. There is complexity around reporting, but not around decision making. So often artists get, I don't want a board because they're going to change my life, they're going to control my output, all of those sorts of things. It may be that having that opportunity that corporate personhood represents is actually quite useful, and you can stack the board with your friends. It might not be that great. You know, it might not be great for decision making. You know, I mean, part of really good governance is that a board is actually reflecting and bringing their expertise to the room. But the strategy of you wanting to expand might mean that you actually want that protection that is created by a company.
If you're a commercial entity, as Joe said, if you're selling stuff, wacko, you know, you've got great sort of income streams from, you know, your productions, the commercial way forward may be absolutely on point. The not-for-profit, I mean, 95% of the companies I work with are not-for-profit incorporated associations. Partly that's a systemic requirement because Joe mentioned deductible gift recipients status for those entities. That opens up trusts and foundations who cannot give to a commercial entity. Like, you know, you have to be a not-for-profit entity to receive deductible gift recipient status and therefore to apply to a trust or foundation. So that's one example. I mean, there are workarounds for that currently. Under Creative Australia, there's a thing called the Australian Cultural Fund. Well, hopefully some of you know about that, but that's essentially a workaround for you to use our deductible gift recipient status for you to go and approach a trust or foundation and to offer a tax receipt to an individual donor. The tax office basically designates deductible gift recipient status. As an individual, you can't get it. As a for-profit, you can't get it. So you've got to kind of get your head around all that. So if you know 60% of your income is coming from trusts and foundations and your individual donors, possibly the commercial entity is not necessarily the best way forward. You probably want to open yourself up to, out of those 5 funding streams, you want to open yourself up to at least 3 of them, you know, quite openly.
We all work under the sort of premise that the artistic director, for example, is leading in an ownership kind of way the company of a not-for-profit. The board is actually where the buck stops financially, and that's why you might get some... And legally. So that sense of protection of the employees does allow the artistic director to take risks, and I think one of the most important areas of governance is a risk policy that actually sits down and has a strategy about what kind of risk you'll take. So if you're the artistic director, you might want to be saying, well, this company we don't want to take financial risk, but we are not risk averse as to the art, and there it is. And that if there's a discussion about a budget or about a decision, you'll say, well, we don't want to risk our money, but we do want to risk our creative reputation because that's what we do. So in all of those circumstances, really the board is leadership. The reason why incorporated associations were established as a category of corporation is that their compliance level was not as strict as other kinds of companies. So, for example, a company listed on the Australian Stock Exchange has an enormous amount of reporting requirements, whereas an incorporated association has to have a constitution and is accountable in various ways, but certainly doesn't have to be providing advice to the market on, you know, the loss or write down of some assets or any of that kind of stuff. So if you think of incorporation as one umbrella, there's all of these sort of different categories depending on the kind of risk. I suppose that the tax office perceives the community, or that the government perceives the risk to the community created by those kinds of companies. And some of you will have noticed also in maybe the last 10 years, there's an Aboriginal corporation which also recognises cultural assets and law as part of the assets of the company, and has different kind of representation requirements on its board and so on. So I suppose where I started is if you can kind of almost write down for yourself what your values are and what you want to do, you can probably slot yourself into one of those categories, and the pros, and link the pros and cons, I guess. And there's a convention, but not a requirement to have diversity on your board. And I would advocate that diversity on a board is good for decision making, because having a board where there's someone confident saying that doesn't make sense to me, stop speaking in acronyms, or all of the various things that a board that's full of friends and all people from the same industry all saying the same thing can kind of gobbledygook themselves into a really bad decision really easily. But you can do that if you want. It's just that the cons for that might be that someone from Creative Australia might be, well, there's a series of really poor decisions that you're making. Let's look at your corporate structure.
Within governance structures, we're seeing a little bit of a return to sort of collective management in a way. There's a couple of companies that haven't got the classic board of governance, but they're doing really well with company member board participation. There's a few of those that I've seen around. There's a bit of a trend towards collectivising governance in some way. So we've got artists who are operating, running their practice, but having governance. So really what that means is that we don't have one artist who needs a board, needs all that. Trying to share those services. It's almost a shared service model as well. So I've seen a few examples of that.
Because you have some communities where there's multiple not-for-profits that are essentially having to do the same administration and working towards the same thing. We're getting together and I guess having a broader perspective in terms of how they operate, and then having each of those smaller organisations. Like, how would that work? Like, could you have...
There's a community in Yanaki that has a board that's their board for all of their, or for many of their community orgs. So there's a very experienced chair who's worked in the commercial sector, but there's a local lawyer and a local accountant who have, that's the three directors that are there, and then there's some community members and others. So they effectively have a 7-person committee that does all the filing, all the blah blah, that all of the paperwork, develops all the policies that everybody has to have, does the child safe cards, all that kind of stuff. And then they meet regularly with the group leaders. So for example, if it was your company, it might be yourself meeting with that sort of board for hire kind of situation to say, here's some specific reporting we need, or someone who will read your grant application before you submit it, and so on. And I think that's a really interesting model in a regional setting.
Yeah.
So I'm Leith Thomas. I'm one of the directors at a consulting business called Future Tense that's working with RAV on the Making Change strategy. We do a lot of work for money in the arts and culture space. We aren't necessarily creative practitioners, though we are in our private lives, but we do a lot of strategic work, research, that kind of thing. We are a profit centre, small though it is. But one of the things that one of my directors, one of my fellow directors, Fionn Bastos, has done through her many years working with a number of elders in and around Fitzroy and North Melbourne is establish a creative drop-in space, which is targeting the disadvantaged Indigenous communities around inner Melbourne, particularly focused on Fitzroy, as I say, Fitzroy, Collingwood and through to Richmond. And we were one of the core things that helped us get this, we started doing it using the profits of our business to get the initiative off the ground. That's not sustainable.
But you see, that's the sort of, it's a for profit, but it's for purpose at the same time.
It's a for purpose thing. Our governance is literally, there are 3 directors. We can decide what we want to do, and we decided this was something that we wanted to do, working with that community, and even though we're a for-profit entity, we can use some of these workarounds like the Australian Cultural Fund that people can donate to Black Pearl Art Studio in Fitzroy, and that money, they can get their tax deduction and we can get some money to pay the rent, to buy the food, to buy the art materials. Likewise, I think somebody mentioned before, it's really hard to get some forms of philanthropic funding if you're not a not-for-profit. And there are obviously a lot that don't even look at for-profit entities.
Well, they're not allowed to.
They're not allowed to.
You legally can't give a grant to a for-profit entity.
But, and I guess where I was going with the point was that I think, and I think I had this conversation with some other workshop people in the break, but I think it's really important to be able to define not only what you're doing, but why you're doing it. Back to your point, both of your points actually at the start, because that's what resonates with people. So we have, in the Black Pearl instance, we are on a set pilot phase that's going to transition out into a separate entity in the next 18 months. But we've had a lot of support from a lot of different, some of those that can provide funds to entities other than not-for-profit entities, because they believed in the mission of what Black Pearl was trying to do. That was what they got excited about. That was what they wanted to contribute towards. And I think that it would be folly to think that the entity structure that you choose, or some of those governance structures and entity choices that you make are really important, but they are secondary choices to the fundamental purpose of what you're trying to achieve. And I think they can be a good, or they can be a bad distraction if you haven't got that core idea and rationale sorted out.
And thank you everyone for coming along. It's a really great turnout. Please make sure you follow us on all the socials, but we do also have the website wearemakingchange.com.au. Sign up because we do send out weekly opportunities newsletter. It's just basically a list of the opportunities that exist out there for creatives from this region. And every 6 to 8 weeks or so, we'll send out an update on what the project's doing, what we've found. We'll be featuring creatives as part of that as well. So go to the website and sign up for that, and you'll get that in your inbox. So yeah, thanks everyone.